Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 70th Courageous Conversation. There's a large interest in this particular conversation. We have many people joining us. Some people are still not on, but we'll start the seminar right now. I'd like to say that we have a stellar Saskatchewan panel assembled here, and I want to thank all the panelists for coming and working with us to create this Courageous Conversation. These conversations are designed to cultivate understanding and bridge divisions in the community. They explore issues affecting our society with a human rights lens on it. Courageous Conversations focus on 6 core topics: racial discrimination, the need to reconcile with Indigenous people, mental health and addictions issues, disability issues, the Holocaust, and gender. Which brings us to today's panel discussion: representative equity, women in politics. This is an idea that Norma Gunningham-Cappan, our executive director, fostered a few years ago, and we've been able to put it together with this particular panel, and we're really happy with the panelists because they have a lot to add to the conversation. This event is intended to serve as a precursor to International Women's Day, which takes place on March the 8th. International Women's Day celebrates the social, economic, political, cultural achievements of women around the world. This year's theme is particularly pertinent to this discussion: women in leadership, achieving an equal future in a post-COVID world. To achieve this goal, to create an equitable and an equal future, requires that we address many issues faced by women in our society. It requires having conversations that matter, conversations that are courageous, conversations that are constructive. It requires action and commitment. For its part, the Commission is committed to addressing gender issues through our public education mandate, our individual complaints process, and through our systemic advocacy initiatives. This past year, the Commission helped spearhead the Enough Already initiative, a coalition committed to working with government, businesses, chambers of commerce, industry associations, unions, community organizations to address and prevent workplace sexual harassment. It's no secret that the social and systemic barriers women face in society are many. Everyone must work together to remove these barriers, to ensure that women have full and effective participation in public life, both in the workplace and in politics. Increasing women's representation in politics is essential. More women at the political table in positions of power will lead to a greater gender equality. It will lead to better social, economic, and political outcomes for all Canadians. And it can help create a democracy that is more equitable, vibrant, and inclusive. I now introduce to you our MC, Leisha Grabinski. Leisha is a journalist who has worked with CBC in Regina, Winnipeg, Prince Rupert, and Calgary, and has since 2013 been the voice of CBC Radio's Saskatoon Morning program. Leisha?
Thank you so much. Thank you for those that strong introduction in terms of the topic today. And hello to everyone. Hello from my basement. I do a lot of work in my basement these days. This is where I host the CBC morning radio show called Saskatoon Morning, which you can listen to on CBC Radio 1, 94.1 FM here in my city. And even though I spend a lot of time in this basement and a lot of time staring at screens, I still haven't mastered the eye contact. So if I appear a bit awkward, my apologies. And if you feel awkward, you're not the only one. This is still a very strange way to come together, but what a wonderful opportunity to talk about such an important topic. And really, this topic couldn't be more relevant right now. You know, just this week, NDP MLA Vicky Mowat took a phone call from an angry constituent. And of course, this is not uncommon. You know, people are often not pleased with politicians, but this call had a tone that didn't really sit well with Vicky Mowat. The caller had told her to shut up and go back to her teaching career. And he chastised her for how she spoke to another male politician, saying that the other guy was a, quote, Rowan man. And so Vicky Mowat was certain that the same tone would not have been taken with a male politician. And so she decided to turn to Twitter to talk about this, to raise awareness and to talk about this phone call and to help shift the conversation. Because as you're going to hear today, we need positive role models who are women, who are politicians. And so together we can stand up to the kind of phone call, what Vicky Mowat dealt with this week. And so I interviewed her about this, and two things stood out to me. It's not uncommon. It's definitely not the first phone call of this nature that she's received. But it was also hard for her to convey exactly how this man spoke to her, to really put her finger on the gender biases that were coming through in this conversation. But what we do know is that there are perceptions of female politicians, and they are problematic. And the numbers are not where we need them to be. So although women's representation in the House of Commons is at an all-time high, it still falls below the United Nations recommendation of having at least 30% as the critical threshold for women in decision-making roles. Canada ranks 60th out of 193 countries worldwide for the representation of women in single or lower houses of national parliaments. And so there is work to do, and it starts with courageous conversations like this one. And so we will begin today with Dr. Lillian Dick, who is a former Canadian senator. She's going to start off today by answering this question that we have for you. What are the most important lessons learned during your career that would help women in politics?
Wonderful to be with this distinguished group. I wish that we could all be together to be in person and facilitate a really good conversation. My perspective as an unelected senator is going to be different from the rest of you, or most of you anyway, who are elected. And of course, the perspective that I have is one of a great privilege of not having to, put in the time and the community efforts in order to get elected, and then to have to pay attention constantly with your elected constituents. So I come from a very privileged place, and I had the honor of serving as a senator for Saskatchewan for 15 and a half years. And I'd like to thank former Prime Minister Paul Martin for appointing me. And he appointed me because I'm an Aboriginal woman. And because, unlike at that time, there were very few Aboriginal people, let alone women, who had doctorate degrees. So I was in a very different category of Aboriginal women. So I had that privilege. And Leisha, thank you for those introductory comments. I will touch a little bit on gender discrimination. When I arrived in the Senate, it was about 30% women. It's now about 50%. And so I do see things changing in the Senate with the increasing representation of women. But to get back to the question, I think the first lesson I wanted to talk about was, I titled it as Be True to Yourself and Your Values. Try to continue to be who you are as much as possible. And from my perspective, my identities and my values were the basic factors underlying my work in the Senate. My personal experiences as a woman scientist and a non-white woman, along with a documented history of discrimination against women, Chinese, and Indigenous Canadians, gave me a different and important perspective on legal, legislative, and political matters. I don't consider myself a politician because I'm not elected, but I consider myself a parliamentarian. It seems like we've reached a tipping point in North America with regard to racism and sexism to some extent, wherein women and marginalized minorities have had enough with the Black Lives Matter movement and now the BIPOC movement. We're rallying against the colonial systems of white male privilege in workplaces and society at large, and in the Senate as well. At this point in time, then I think it's really important that we have more Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the Senate and all political bodies in order to initiate the change, because I think it is people like that who drive the change, who bring that issue to the floor to be discussed. So who you are as a person matters. Our laws are a reflection of society, and as long as parliaments or legislative bodies are comprised only of men, they're not anymore, But if they're only of men, of course, the laws are going to reflect mainly the male perspective on things. So it's really important that we diversify who's actually sitting in those legislative bodies. With greater numbers of women and minorities, then there's a greater possibility of changing the colonial footings of our legislative and government policies. With more Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we can move away from the values of the colonial era, the Sir John A. Macdonald style of white male privilege and supremacy of economic development over societal well-being. So that's the first lesson, be true to yourself. Part of that too is to continue to treat others the way you would like to be treated, with respect. And you kind of brought that up yourself, Leisha, in the introductory comments. I know I won't work on projects who treat me with disrespect or attempt to control or dominate me. I now had that choice when I was in the Senate. When I was in the workplace, I didn't necessarily have that choice. I also find it more difficult to be open to the ideas of such people. So conversely, if you treat your colleagues with respect, they're more likely to be open to your ideas and become allies. It's not always easy. There are some very difficult people and difficult situations. Having said that, there were times when reason and politeness and good manners didn't work. And on 3 or 4 occasions when I was in the Senate for 15 and a half years, I had to create a stink. I had to be a skunk, create a stink. For example, many years ago, when my caucus was waffling about holding a press conference to release legal arguments supporting the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I felt betrayed and disrespected. I had thought they were willing to take a public stand, but then our leader backed away and the caucus members were beginning to follow suit. This was too much to bear. So I stood up at the meeting and said to the leader that he was making excuses and told him that he was reneging on a commitment and that wasn't right. And furthermore, if the rest of the caucus wanted me as a member, they'd have to do better. Then I stood up and walked out on them. And I said to my seatmate, who the other Aboriginal woman, Senator Sandra Lovelace Nicholas, I said, Sandra, come with me. They don't respect us. And we walked out. The next day, I was told they would hold a press conference. And apparently, I gained a lot of respect that day. So, as women, we tend to be very polite. We try our best to get along with people. But at times, and I think it should be rare times, you do have to create a stink. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I think you're pushed to do it when you've reached your limit, when enough is enough, because I think women are so passionate about what we do in our work that when you reach the end of your rope. Second lesson was be willing to be part of a compatible caucus or a team. I was not part of a caucus for the first 4 years, but was fortunate to have been accepted by the NDP Women's Caucus. I joined the Liberal caucus after 4 years of being an independent senator under the conditions that I vote independently, not whatever the Liberals wanted. I could still vote as I chose, and that they would support my work on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Being part of a caucus allowed me to know what was going on in terms of any agreements between the political parties and what was going to proceed on the Senate floor and so on. Being part of that caucus allowed me to be a member of committees. At that time, you had to be a member of a political caucus to be a member of a committee. That's changed now. And you also had to be a member of a caucus before you could be in a leadership position like the chair of a committee. Excuse me. So being part of a caucus or a team allows you to discuss ideas and bills in a supportive and confidential manner. It expands your perspective, and most importantly, you will need support for your ideas, and your caucus can provide that. Related to that is the idea that you need a supportive team. Hire, support, and reward excellent staff. I was very fortunate to have worked with a brilliant young woman with whom I could communicate easily and with whom I could address issues and gain from her insights, especially on the legal side. My other administrative staff kept me kept my daily routine, frequent air travel, and so on, working smoothly so that I could deal with the unexpected changes and concentrate on my work. So I found basically that my style as working as a senator was basically the way I worked as a scientist, and which I think is the way most mothers work. We listen, we learn, we focus on problem solving, and are open-minded to unusual solutions or suitable compromises. I found that when discussing Indigenous issues, for example, when I would ask a question, the answer would be, you can't do that, or it can't be done. Sound familiar, ladies? That's the answer I often got throughout my life. Well, as a woman, you can't do that. Rather than proceed, I'd ask more questions to get at the root of the problem and make that problem or obstacle part of the solution by identifying it, talking about it, and looking for ways to get around it. For example, when we were doing the committee study of Bill S3, a bill which the government claimed removed all sex-based discrimination against Indian women with regard to registered status, it was clear that the government's claim was false. Normally, the committee would have recommended the Senate not pass the bill. Then there would have been a debate in the Senate and a vote in the Senate. However, we short-circuited the process and took the highly unusual step of sending the bill back to the House of Commons, stating that it needed more work because it didn't do what the government claimed. It was unsatisfactory. That was the obvious remedy, but it was the first time that a committee had a suspended study because the bill was not satisfactory. So in addition to being open-minded to different ways of doing business you also have to have backup plans, finding other ways of getting the job done in case plan A doesn't work. I think all women have this. We also have plan B, plan C, and plan D. If one plan doesn't work, you shift to the other one. In other words, be flexible and be persistent in reaching your goals, especially in legislative bodies, because man, the process is so very slow. So you have to be persistent and don't give up. I think I will end there. I don't know how much time I've taken, and I know there's a lot of speakers, so I will end there. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on that particular question.
Thank you so much, Lily and Dick. I could listen to you all day. Thank you. We'll go now to Bev Dubois, who is a Saskatoon City Councillor. And Councillor Dubois, here's your question for this morning. What do you believe you need to have to be fully prepared for this job as councillor? Is it academics? Is it lived experience, work experience, or a combination of all three?
Well, thank you very much, Leisha, and good morning to everyone. And I too would like to thank the Saskatchewan Human Rights Association for planning this. I know it was planned for last year and the pandemic hit about 2 months before it was supposed to happen. And I really give them credit for pushing through and doing it virtually the way we're doing everything nowadays. And we're all very used to that. And quite frankly, I will say that we are still getting our jobs done virtually. And just before I get into the question, I would like to say that you've heard different things, in the media on governments, running smoothly. Are they running well virtually? I am proud to say that Saskatoon City Council has never missed a meeting since the pandemic began. In fact, we have had many more meetings through the pandemic. When it first hit, we were actually meeting every morning to lay out a road map for what was happening in our city and to ensure that the citizens of Saskatoon were looked after from a municipal perspective. So I'm very proud of that. So my question is, what do you believe you need to have to be fully prepared for this job? Academics, lived experience, work experience, or all three? And it's definitely all three. And Lillian did mention many characteristics, which I completely support, which pertains to all of these areas that you've asked me about. And I will say you can never be fully prepared for the job of a politician because there's no real job description. There's no real roadmap, quite frankly. And so you have to you have to do a lot of that on your own. And I see other colleagues here shaking their heads. You have to do it on your own. You have to figure out what is best for you. What do you need to hopefully be successful and to contribute. So I'm hoping I'm not going to bore you with some of the rest. I'm going to just talk about briefly, but I've spoken to schools, I've spoken to groups in the past, and they like to hear about some of this, and it goes back for me right to elementary school, where I was involved in the school. First of all, I didn't want to go to school. My mother, I wouldn't go to kindergarten. She finally kept me home and was thinking, oh my God, what's my daughter, what's going to happen? But once I went to grade 1, you couldn't keep me back. You had to drag me out of school because I loved school, and I also loved helping at school and volunteering at school. And the same thing was happened in high school. I mean, I think I ran Walter Murray for 4 years as a student, volunteering and being on the student. When Walter Murray, we called it the SRG, the Student Representative Government, not the Student Representative Council. And I ran for that all 4 years, and I was successful and worked very hard to make the school better for the students. And, I didn't know then. I knew I was interested in politics. I knew I was interested in helping people, I will tell you. And I've often said when I've spoken to groups, I should have been a social worker, because that's what my goal is to make life better for people. So in high school, I learned and grew a lot. And so if we have any young people on the call today, I want you to listen and know that who you meet in high school, what you do, experiences you have, that can be a roadmap for the rest of your life, and I'm a testament to that. So work hard and be involved and get the job done. Now in university too, I was involved, but I had to cut back because I had 3 part-time jobs. So you had to balance time, but I was still very involved in, and again, that was a huge roadmap for me to where I am today. So my point in all of this is that this certainly made a difference in me being prepared to run for politics. And again, another, as I mentioned, you never know who you might meet along the way, and in these experiences and expanding your perspective that will help you down the road when you decide to run for politics, whenever that might be. Now, lived experience. And of course, this is, to me, it's important no matter what you are doing in life, professional or personal. Lived experience can make you relate to constituents when they contact me about issues. For example, if you're a homeowner, you're dealing with things that people will call about: municipal taxes, snow removal, garbage pickup. So those things are, it sounds very trivial, but it's really not in the job of a city councilor, because you can see what these people are going through. You can see and hear the pain when we had our snow on November 9th. I mean, that was major for our city, and I experienced it as a homeowner and as a resident in the city of Saskatoon. So you can sympathize and empathize with people when they are calling you with their different issues. The other thing with the lived experience in relation to being a politician is being a part of the community that you're in. And that can be a community association, that can be a parent council if you happen to be a parent. That is working in the community, again, getting to know people, helping the community, and making it better. And my theme is always making it better and helping people. That's what I'm in this for. So those are things that I did, and I was on the associations. I always ended up, being the chair or the president, but that's the way I am. I'm a leader, I'm not a follower, and I tend to like to lead and delegate and get people on the jobs to get the job done. So the experiences that students and the community have, they all make things better to partake in these activities. And I really think this is all part and parcel of preparing for politics, especially municipal politics. Now we all know, that the different levels of politics are different. I mean, municipal politics, we're closer to the people. We're dealing with issues that affect their everyday lives. So volunteer experience, in my mind, is in being a city councillor is extremely important. You learn about giving back to your community, because really that is what you are doing, in my mind, when you are in politics. That is, if you are in politics for the right reason, to make your community a better place to live, work, and raise a family, and not just for a job. And I'm very adamant about that, because we all know folks, over that are in it for a job. But so that is something that I'm very adamant about. Work experience is also very important. It can give you a background of being a city councillor encompasses a huge variety of issues to deal with, as I've mentioned some earlier. Now, it can be dealing with conversion therapy that we've been dealing with, which was huge. It was a very emotional, passionate issue where I had people on both sides of the spectrum in my ward. But you are dealing with folks that are sometimes crying on the phone to me. And so you have to have that compassion, and you have to know your issue, and you have to know what you're talking about. You might not be in agreement with them, but you have to know, and you have to be truthful to the folks. I mean, it could be speed limits. That's the flavor of the day right now. I've gotten, I think, already 15 emails on speed limits. And no, we're not changing the speed limits in Saskatoon to 30, just so that and others know, and that's been miscommunicated, and that's that's not what we're doing. So these are all different issues. As I've said, it can be personal. It can be these issues can be personal. They can be inconvenient, or they can just be a pain in the butt to people. But you still have to make the people feel important, and show them that you care about the issues that they're talking about, and that you're listening to them. So because it does affect their lives, and they are passionate about these issues. So you have to elude that passionate and that caring to them, and hopefully not be forcing that. You need to be authentic, and you need to be caring to the folks. So I've probably gone on too long, but the bottom line is all three of those areas make a huge difference. And anyone out there, I really would suggest that you take those areas, and if you have to, you pick what part of that would make you a better person to run for politics. And I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also got 15 emails on the speed limit conversation, so that's a hot topic we'll be hearing from more in the coming days and weeks and months. We were supposed to hear from Nicole Sarr, who is a provincial NDP MLA for Regina Douglas Park, but she had to step away this morning. So we'll move next to Sherry Benson, former NDP MP for Saskatoon West. Sherry, hello. The question we're posing to you today, what is the best question you were asked during your time in politics?
Thank you, Risha. And I just want to echo what I'm just so happy to be here with you all, and to be with such a distinguished panel. It's an honor. I always like to tell people, if you told me back in 2014, Sherry, you're going to run for office, never mind be elected as a member of parliament, I would have told you, as my mother would say, to go jump in a lake. And for those that are a bit younger than me and don't know what that term means, it's just a polite way to tell people to, go it. And, when I'm speaking with younger people, I ask them, have you ever thought of running for office? And no one ever tells me to sort of jump in the lake politely. But more often than not, I get the, well, I can't because I'm too young, I'm too this, I'm too that, fill in the blank. And I think many of us, especially women, sort of self-select ourselves out of running for elected office, and we do that for lots of different reasons. And I'm just sharing that with you today because of sort of what we're discussing. And what we're discussing, I think, is the underrepresentation of women in politics, or said differently, the overrepresentation of men in politics, and how we change that. And the answers and the solutions, and I think we'll hear some of that today, are to that sort of issue, or in how you define the question, or where you want to intervene in the problem. And one way we intervene with individuals, and one way we intervene at a systemic level. Or sort of said differently, we intervene to change kind of what the system is and change the system, while we also can support those women that have come forward. Both are important, both interventions matter, but both have to happen in order for us to see a more representative government. I think I just kind of want to kind of acknowledge, as sort of Lillian did, that my experience as someone, I'm often assumed to be cisgendered. I grew up in a very middle class family. I had lots of privileges. I'm not Indigenous. So my circumstances of my birth really allowed me a lot of advantages, and allowed me, I think, to step into politics in a way, into political life where it may not be the same for others. So that's kind of a big lead up, Isha, to the question. It's kind of like a drum roll. It was sort of hard to figure out what was, it took me a long time to figure out what was the question. And then it just kind of beamed to me like some kind of, from outer space. But the first year I was a member of Parliament for Saskatoon West, I was invited to speak to a grade 8 class at the Saskatoon French School. And they were a pretty tough crowd. I kind of foolishly told the teacher, oh, they can ask me anything, I'm ready for anything, they can ask me. And of course they did ask me pretty well everything. One student actually asked me about monetary policy. Like, I was like, it was over my head. But the best question, and the one that really was the most profound to me, was one of the students asked me who my best friend was in Parliament. And trust me, no one had ever asked me that question before. And so I was somewhat taken aback. But that question made me think, and the answer really did help me navigate political life. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But, when you arrive in Ottawa and you take your seat in the House of Commons, it's kind of like showing up. I found it like showing up for work in another planet. It was such a contrast in so many ways to my previous life at UNEDWIC. I mean, 80% of the people there were men. The vast majority are either lawyers or business people. That's their previous life experience. Very few of the MPs, I think about 5 of them, out of 338 people, had this sort of a similar experience, like came from the nonprofit sector. So saying it was surreal what is an understatement. I mean, it was just such a, it was just so unbelievable. The orientation process to this new life was pretty minimal. It was mostly focused on just the practicalities, like how to get your laptop on the parliamentary network system, things like that. But how things worked, how the culture, the norms, the shorthand, the expectations of what being a great MP looked like, all that was pretty well left off the agenda. And I think, as Lillian said, you're sort of left there on your own to figure that out. I did feel like a fish out of water, like a stranger in a strange land without a map. And I want to tell you, literally, there is no map to the parliamentary buildings. And I think it's because it's some kind of security issue. So there is a map, but you don't get a map. And I'm sure for the first 6 months, I just wandered the halls trying to find out, where's that room, all those kinds of things. So I hope you can see why having a best friend in Parliament was pretty key to my survival as a first timer. And really not just surviving, but really to start to be an effective representative for the people that put me there. Because the sooner you understand and being able to navigate a system, I think the sooner you can really contribute and really put your heart into it. So finding a best friend in Parliament also wasn't included in the orientation. There was no job description or so that kid at the Saskatoon French School really did me a big favor because I searched for a best friend. And so my best friend in Parliament was Linda Duncan. She was the MP for Edmonton Strathcona. And I want to tell you why she made such a great best friend. I mean, other than she is great. And she was a wonderful person. She's super smart, tenacious, just a wealth of experience and knowledge. I could go on. But I'll sort of share with you what I think the criteria is to be a best friend. And I think you'll understand why it's important. A best friend needs to treat all your questions as important. They must be generous and candid and open. A best friend needs to tell you the truth, help you understand your mistakes, and they must want you to exceed. So don't hold back on that feedback. They share all the inside trade secrets, all those unwritten rules, those things, how things work. A best friend needs to understand where you're coming from and share or appreciate or respect your background and how that adds value to your role as a politician. Best friends answer the question, how do I do? And they tell you the truth. They give you constructive feedback and they help you for the next time you're in that situation. A best friend needs to understand that ultimately you decide when to take or leave their advice and chart your own way, and they can't be offended or take it personally. Linda was forever telling me I was too nice. And I could see Lillian laughing. And at first I took that as a comment, like I needed to change. I'm too nice. I'm too nice. But when I stopped hearing it in that way, it became a way for me to know when I was being me as a politician and not her. Her and I were different, but even the fact that we were different sort of helped me out. And I think ultimately, for me, a best friend in politics needs to understand the system and the gender bias that's baked into the system. For those times when you find yourself internalizing what is wrong with the system as a personal defect in you, and that happens. They set you straight during those very tough times when you question yourself instead of questioning the system. There are obviously lots of things you need to have to be successful in politics, like votes and money and volunteers and all those kinds of things. But I do think without a BFF, it'll be tougher, lonelier, and dare I say, I think less successful. And I think I'll just end with saying, never underestimate the power of an 8th grader to change your life. Thank you.
Thank you. I would agree. That was a fantastic question. I never would have thought of that, and that was fantastic. Thank you, Sherry. We'll move now to Sandra Masters, Regina's new mayor. Sandra, hello. Our question for you is this. What is a question you wish you had been asked but never were?
I would offer my thanks and the opportunity as well to the Human Rights Commission. This is for someone new to politics. This is I'm not going to lie, that imposter syndrome that we all somewhat suffer from upon occasion. I'm not sure I'm at 100 days yet, but by virtue of winning an election, I get to claim to be a leader, and I'm good with it. We'll keep moving forward in that regard. The question that I wish I'd been asked is not the question I get asked. I wish I was asked once, what did it feel like to beat an incumbent, or how did I beat an incumbent? Because the question I get asked all the time is, what does it feel like to be the first woman mayor of the city of Regina? And to which my cheeky answer is, the computer equipment and chairs work the same. I don't have another answer for you because I am who I am. So why I wish I was asked that question is because I'm a big fan of numbers, and the truth of the matter is, statistically, and depending on where you're looking, 85 to 90% of incumbents get reelected. And from a challenger's perspective, it's 6 to 7% of challengers are actually effective in defeating incumbents, especially two-term incumbents. And if I look to the 54 major cities in the country of Canada, 8 of them are female, and which makes that 15%. So essentially, the odds are stacked against you as a woman, but the odds are stacked against anyone running against an incumbent, but people choose to focus on the gender issue. And so I will tell you that when I was formulating my campaign, when I actually started talking to people outside of my own personal echo chamber, that became, people would get excited about the fact that, well, you're a woman and you have a potential of winning, like this would be a real thing. And they wanted to focus on that. And I dismissed it out of turn, which I think crushed some of the younger women on my team. And I just simply said, to focus on my gender actually reduces me as a person in some respects. And I personally walk this really fine line between completely understanding and being appreciative of the significance of the representation, about being at the table, being in the room, being in that position of leadership, and resenting the distinction that frankly makes me feel like a bit of a novelty, because there's that element to it which then says that, oh, isn't that cute? You got elected. And I walk that fine line between that, and I probably didn't have appreciation for it. It was the compilation of that sense of representation. During my campaign, I sat with a woman who had asked to be my campaign manager. And she's an incredible woman, a former journalist, and intelligent, and probably one of the kindest people I've ever met, just a genuinely kind soul. And her response to me was, I can't, but I want to participate. She goes, I'd love to get you ready for your media. She goes, but I might fail you, and this is hugely significant to me. And I said, okay, thank you. And she goes, but I really want you to run. And so when I met back with her and I said, would you be happy to fill this role on the team? And she said, are you going to do it? And I went, yeah, no, I'm going to do it. The polling says that my chances of winning are less than 50%, just so you know, I'm a long shot. And she said, and she got teary-eyed and she said, you have no idea how much it would mean to my daughter that you run. And I'm struck by that. And then again and again and again, I would run into people, and that was kind of the feeling that they had, especially younger women. And I have this sense that, and I'm about to be 51, there's this sense of sort of being polished by sandpaper a little bit, to fighting to get into rooms and getting to sit at tables. And so I feel that if your head's just hard enough and you're just determined enough, you have a tendency to make space. Like, we make space for ourselves. And I started to appreciate the fact that I wasn't just making space for me anymore. I might be making space for someone who's 10 years old looking to this going, well, sure you can. And you'll love the story because it's ironic in a way. When I was 18 years old, I got invited to participate in a beauty pageant, believe it or not. And I lost, like hands down lost. I didn't win Miss Congeniality. I won nothing. But when I was participating in it, we all had to give a speech about what it is we thought female representation. I'm talking about 1988 right now. And my mom and dad were in the crowd. And my mom and dad, very traditional family. Mom worked in a nursing home. Dad, was the major breadwinner. I had 3 older brothers. I did the dishes. They didn't. Like, very traditional upbringing. And I remember giving this speech about how I thought in my lifetime a woman could be Prime Minister of Canada. Like, why can't we? It never occurred to me that we couldn't be. And that was the beauty, frankly, of my father, who broke down in tears. And he was a very stoic, quiet man. And he broke down in tears that I had this cockamamie sense that, why can't we? Like, I would always say, why can't we? And so going back to beating an incumbent, I continue to resist that. And I get asked all the time about what does it feel like to be the first female mayor? I can't answer the question. I'm a woman all my life. I can only tell you that the impact that that I sense from women who are kind of go get 'em, who encourage, and who maybe even disagree with me on policy issues, but keep speaking plainly and keep working hard. And really, You want to know how I beat an incumbent? It was an incredible team. It was, I would get in the room, and I think I did what every other woman on this panel did, which is you work hard and you listen and you work to find solutions. You're always on the lookout. And this is something that I think is a gift a lot of us possess, is that we're able to listen to multiple groups of people across the spectrum, whether it's economics or social issues or tourism to civic operations, and we weave stories together. You listen to people, we intake their information, and you were always weaving that pattern together to come up with, wait a minute, this is connected to this. I think we have a gift in how we're able to listen, weave it together, and then communicate it back out. And that would be the number one takeaway I would have from a campaign, which was very much against the odds, is that when people would meet me and I would be able to talk about stories, but I would have woven together issues and themes and be able to speak about them. That was every takeaway was, what can we do to help get you elected? And it's tell your friends. And it was during a pandemic, very much between social media and meeting one-on-one and then having them spread that news. But without that ability to work hard, to listen, to find solutions, and then to weave stories together and be able to communicate them back out, never would have happened. Anyways, yeah.
Amazing. Mayor Masters, thank you. We'll move now to Diane Boyko, who is chair of the Greater Saskatoon Catholic School Board. And Diane, your question is this: can you talk about gender equity in relation to your experience on the Greater Saskatoon Catholic School Board of Education?
Well, thank you, Leisha. Well, Slava Isusa Christou. Glory be to Jesus Christ and glory be to the Creator. I'd also like to thank Chief Commissioner Arnott and the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission for the invitation and the opportunity to join everyone on this critical conversation platform on beautiful Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Also in Montgomery, where there is a 40-kilometer zone throughout our whole community, and it works fine. And I'm honored to share this time of reflection and learning with all of my fellow panelists and everyone who's listening. So we all believe that elected representation should reflect the makeup of our citizens, and school boards have a great impact on the community at a local level. Locally elected school boards are a democratic form of government that is closest to the community. The role of boards is to bring the voice and local perspective to education. Local boards, they are an important part of the dynamic and the democratic system in Saskatchewan, and they bring forward the voice that students, families, and communities feel that they are heard by their elected officials. In Saskatchewan, there's 27 boards across the province with a great diversity in geography and population, and all within the public school boards, the Catholic school boards, and the Francophone school boards. And I think it's fair to say that school boards in Saskatchewan and perhaps across Canada are leading the way as local governments in terms of elected representation. We strive to have more diversity on local elected boards, but we are very encouraged by all the results from the November 2020 school board elections. So I was curious about what some of those statistics were. So I asked someone to compile some of those. So thank you, Jill, from the Saskatchewan School Boards Association. But following that school board election in November, it is estimated that among all trustees elected in Saskatchewan, 58% are women and 42% are men. Also of note is that 14% of all trustees elected identify as having Indigenous ancestry. And among those Indigenous trustees, 52% are women and 48% are men. It's estimated that currently 20%, or 1 in 5 trustees in Saskatchewan, has either Indigenous ancestry or are of a visible minority. Those are exciting facts on a provincial level. And I'd also like to share with you some facts from my school division, from Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools. So of our 10-member board, we govern with an even balanced representation, 5 men and 5 women. Of our 6 learning superintendents, we've achieved balance, 3 women and 3 men. And our 50 school-based administrators, so that would include principals and vice principals, have also achieved balance, 50% women. We are making great progress. And schools have always provided that opportunity for women to take on leadership roles. The Ministry of Education, for those of you that know, speaks to school community councils. So the Catholic school community councils that we have are mandated to operate within schools in Saskatchewan. They involve parents, students, community members, and school staff working together to ensure that they affect student learning and that community well-being is looked after. The bridge from Catholic school community councils to our trustees is a very important connection. And it's very important to mention here that the SCC membership includes elected and appointed members. And I make this point because in many cases, the first stepping stone women take, if they have any political aspirations, comes right from Catholic school community councils or school community councils. And because of the uniqueness of the membership, women who are parents and guardians of students, and also women who are community members, have the opportunity to serve on the councils and hone their skills in governance. And so the desire that they have to represent community, the desire to share our talents, to participate in school board governance, for many of us was the next level we tried to attain of our local school board experiences. And we were encouraged by other women trustees to put our names forward, and the mentorship of these women cannot be overemphasized. And so in 2003, when I got elected, that's exactly how I came to these tables, is by a trustee who was retiring, a female trustee, and she was encouraging me to put my name forward. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that I feel very honored. And then I found out that there were 17 people running for 7 positions. And I think she talked to the other 10 people who were running, not the incumbents. So it was, it was a little bit of a, I guess I was special, but not the only one. And so that journey that I've been on has been just really fulfilling. And I think, you know, when you speak about how you grow up, I grew up in a small town called Alvina, which is just about 80 kilometers northeast of Saskatoon. And for those of you that are part of a small town in your upbringing, you will, you know, remember that we were all part of community, that we were all leaders in our own capacities, that if you didn't play on the ball team, there was no ball team because we needed 9 solid players. That, you know, if the curling rink canteen needed participation from the school, you were in grade 7 and you were helping cook and balance books and doing all of those things that meant that you were contributing to community. And so when I became a trustee in 2003, I had already had both my daughters were in the Ukrainian bilingual program here in Saskatoon, and I had been on the parent councils, as they were called then, and participated in that way. And so in 2003, I became a trustee. And from that point on, I've served with just some very fine and incredible men and women who believe strongly that education is the pathway to giving our students the skills to transform the world. And I've been blessed to have that opportunity to serve as the chair for the 12 past years with a board that's faithful to our mandate, that holds educational excellence as a cornerstone, and that are good stewards of our staff and our resources. Our board and our director relationship is solid, and I think that's what all school boards are asked to do, is to have that relationship, to give that the capacity to our directors of education to fulfill the board's priorities. And I believe that the work that I do in building partnerships with numerous agencies and service and community groups to ensure education is at the forefront of those community conversations. It's helped me to become a better representative of the division. I believe that having that kind of connection to community is what all of us in all of our different spheres come together to give society as a whole the best that we can possibly give them, the best life that we can possibly give them. And that contributing, you know, the opportunity to contribute has always been afforded to me. And I don't take that lightly. When I visit schools, I'm always so conscious of the first impressions that I'm creating for those young minds, for those young girls and boys who are sitting there and wondering who this woman is. And I hope at the end of those kind of meetings that they take something with them. And if that is only to recognize that there's a woman standing in front of them that's a leader, but also that there's a leader that's a woman. And I think that's such a strong need for all of us who are women in politics. It's up to us to be able to give that kind of an example. You know, many women are school board trustees that they choose to further their political aspirations. And that's good. Moving into provincial politics is excellent, and moving into federal politics is excellent. And as examples, I'll give you, Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools, Lisa Lambert is now an MLA. From Saskatoon Public Schools here in Saskatoon, Bronwyn Eyre is the minister in Regina. Our fellow panelist who was to be here, Nicole Sarar, served on the board of Regina Catholic. MLA Carla Beck and MLA Elena Young served on the boards of Regina Public. And there are many more women across the province who give their time and their talents to make our province a better place. And they have journeyed through their school board experiences. And so who is watching that journey of their mothers and their sisters and other women in the community? Our children. And they learn by example, and they model what they see. And if they see themselves in these positions of leadership, if they see that a balance in representation exists, if they believe that every opportunity that's afforded to them is possible, then that will be their norm. And that's what I think all of us that are here today are standing up and saying, that's what we're striving to do. We're striving to ensure that the next trustee, the next MLA, the next mayor, the next city councillor, that all of us are paving that road for all of those young minds to see what those possibilities can be.
Thank you so much, Diane. We'll move now to Erin Pilipo, a political research scientist who I had the opportunity to speak with a couple of days ago. And Erin, your question is this: what role does the media play in promoting or hindering equality in politics?
Hi, everyone. I'm here today because I wrote my master's thesis on women in politics. I specifically analyzed newspaper coverage of Trudeau's gender-balanced cabinet. So I'm going to be talking about newspapers because that's what I know, but I think it's likely that what I learned from my research can be extrapolated to other forms of media as well. So just to frame my research a bit, when Trudeau announced his gender-balanced cabinet appointments, I was excited and encouraged by the strong stance on gender equity taken up by the Prime Minister of Canada. However, I was also really frustrated by the focus in my political studies classes at the time on the assumption that the female ministers were lacking the merit to be there, including by my mostly male professors. So this was when I began to consider where our perceptions of and attitudes towards diverse representation and affirmative action come from. So kind of overall, I found that the representations in newspapers were often far from neutral, and the underlying biases that end up in newspapers can either challenge or reinforce what I called in my research common knowledge understandings of politics and representation. These representations in the media, in turn, can impact Canadians' support for or resistance to diverse representation. So for example, back to the idea of merit, which was also brought up a lot in newspapers regarding the individuals who were either appointed to cabinet or thought to be in the running. So there are two aspects of our common knowledge understanding of merit that are problematic for women. There's probably more, but these are the ones I found in my research. So the first one is that women are held to a higher standard than men. For example, for a man not to have his qualifications questioned, he might have to run his own business. But for a woman to not have her qualifications questioned, she has to run her own business, but also have an advanced degree and also have been in the legislature for multiple terms. So already women have a higher hurdle to get a seat at the table and also be respected once they get there. So the second aspect of our common understanding of merit that is problematic for women is that women's experiences are often not viewed as good experience for politics. So there's an area of research in political science that claims to have proven what is called the gender gap in political knowledge. Basically, that men have more political knowledge than women, which they theorize for various reasons. I have a lot of issues with how this research was conducted, but in some, it is mostly all very narrow and androcentric. So what do I mean by that? Most of these studies only ask questions about federal and international politicians or really specific questions about how government works, because that's how they defined political knowledge. So this is obviously very narrow. There's one study that drives me crazy where they only asked participants 3 questions to determine their level of political knowledge. But it's also androcentric because of why we're here today. Most politicians, especially at the highest levels, are all men. So I remember reading a newspaper article when I was in high school that talked about the gender gap in political knowledge. It seems to pop up in media every so often. And all it did was reinforce my already held beliefs that I was not fit for politics. It made me disengage even more. So since that, this body of research has developed, there has also been some studies that push back against the idea of a gender gap in political knowledge. They have shown that when participants are asked about female politicians, the gender gap disappears. When asked about local politics, the gender gap also disappears. And when asked about practical matters that are very political in nature, such as how to access certain government benefits, the gender gap not only disappears, but reverses. So I think the issue is how we are defining political knowledge, which often excludes knowledges that women tend to have more of. For example, I think being a mother or a caregiver in any capacity is great experience for politics. But it is never framed as good experience. In fact, it is often framed as a negative thing. One of the first things I learned in my degree in political studies was that everything is political. It does not matter if you do not want something to be political, politics touches on everything. So why is it so commonly perpetuated that only lawyers and business people have the experience and knowledge needed to go into politics? Theoretically, we want as many different perspectives and experiences and knowledges as possible in government. So if these perspectives and biases go unchallenged, then they become the norm, or what I refer to in my research as common knowledge understandings, which are often internalized by individuals and then seen as the truth or reality. On the flip side, if media were to challenge these harmful perspectives or even promote alternatives, this could help work towards challenging and changing these norms and our common understandings of diverse representation. So I think I'll stop myself there. I'm very passionate about the supposed gender gap in political knowledge, and I could talk about it forever. So I have to cut myself off at some point. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go through another round of questions, and we'll keep these answers just a little bit shorter. We'll try to give everyone about 4 minutes for each answer. And so we will go back to Dr. Lillian Dick. And this is the question for this round. Lillian, do you feel compelled to advocate for greater political participation of women? And what can be done to change the status quo?
Absolutely, I do feel compelled to advocate for greater political participation of women. And I think many of the comments that the other members of the panel have said this morning kind of fit into that whole idea. Really, you know, if you get right down to it, our population is made up of 51 or 52% women, and theoretically, there's no reason why it shouldn't be the same in all workplaces, all job occupations, and in representation in legislative bodies. But it has been, I think, due to the colonial footings of our society that that's not so, because historically, at one point, women didn't even have the right to vote. That's what it boils down to, you know, the regaining of the rights that we should have. I think a big reason, of course, for the inequity or the unequal representation is the discrimination against women that is normal in our society, and that's beginning to change. Sexism, women have been seen as being inferior to men, less important. They're treated, as Erin said, very differently in the media. Their problems are not seen as important. So there's that whole range of discounting the experiences that women have. There's discrimination in terms of being undervalued. I forget who said this, but you have to have greater qualifications to get your foot in the door than the fellow next to you. So you're undervalued, you're underestimated, and we're paid less. We're still paid less in 2021. Maybe now we might earn on average 85% of what men earn. Well, you know, so there's that deeply, deeply embedded sexism in our society. And women also, this is horrible to say, we are harassed and we suffer sexual violence. That is the worst spectrum. The worst part of the spectrum of discrimination against women is the sexual violence. So women are not seen as equal to men in to many areas of our life. And as I mentioned before, on average, we still earn less. And we still face too much violence from men in our homes, in our workplaces, and elsewhere. So how do we change this? We have to support other women by nominating them to run in elections. We have to have best friends, like Sherry was talking about. We have to have friends that help us in our workplaces. We have to have people that listen to us and believe us. So it really gets back, I guess, to feminism and women's issues. When I was facing my greatest discrimination at the university, I joined the feminist group, and I got tremendous support from most of the women in the feminist community. And without that support, I would not have survived as an academic. So we need to support each other. We need to encourage other women to run for office, and when they get there, provide supports to them, and, you know, apply to the Senate. You know, if I had a choice, I would apply to be a senator rather than run for office. You don't, you know, your term is until you're age 75. You know, if you run for office, your term could be 4 years, or it could be less if an election is called. But basically, a lot has to do with women getting together. And we are now at a point in time, and I just saw this wonderful paper from Policy Options. It just came out the other day, which says in Canada and abroad, new data reveals strong support for gender equality. This came out on March the 1st, 2021, talking about women's issues worldwide, and that, you know, we're reaching a tipping point. So it's a good time to keep pushing, and we'll get there eventually. And I'll cut myself off there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bev Dubois, why is the role of young women in politics so important?
Thank you very much, Leisha. I want to talk about, before I get into that particular question, I want to talk about when I first ran in 2003 to this last election. It was only the last two elections that there were women running against me, if you will, because I was the incumbent. Otherwise, it's always men. And that's what we're talking about here. We have to change that. And we are changing it, and we're going to change it. I'm also very, very proud that out of our 11 members of City Council, the last term from 2016 to 2020, we were 6 females and 5 men. So we were one of the very few councils in the country that had more women. So, you know, I'm very proud of that, and I think that can attest to all of us and the work we're doing in the community to promote and help women get into politics. So, and then of course this term we've got 5 women and 6 men on our council that was elected. 1 woman did not run, and there was a gentleman, David Curtin, that is in that position, but there were no females running. So there couldn't have been a female in that role. So that's just a little bit of background. But why is the role of young women in politics so important? In one sentence, I'll say young women or young people are the future of everything. everything in our world, everything that we do. So of course, young women in politics is so important. We must mentor them and prepare them to be in roles such as politics. Two of the basic approaches in my mind are to have more young women in politics is mentoring them and an exchange of experiences. And we've heard lots of experiences today, and I'm sure that we'll hear more. We experience as women different experiences. And I'm sure between all of us, we could probably write a fairly good coffee table book talking about some of those experiences and some of those comments and some of the things that we've experienced. But the exchange of experiences, I feel, are so important so that the women can learn and comprehend that, you know what, you're going to have those kind of comments, you're going to have those kind of experiences, but it's okay. You're going to get through it. We've gotten through it. You'll get through it, and we'll help you. And we'll help you get through it. I understand that politics is a male-dominated arena, which we've heard. But however, if we can mentor young women and they are given the chance to meet women already within the political arena, we are then empowering and more likely to be able to engage young women in politics. And again, that's what the conversation is here today, is empowering them, and hopefully there's lots of them on the panel listening to this, and we're telling you, you can do it. We've got lots of women here that you can reach out to and talk to. We'll help you. Women do bring a different perspective to politics, and quite frankly, to every conversation and decision at any level. We think different, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I'm not going to bash men. I'm a strong proponent that there must be a balance of women and men at the table. Bring those different thoughts, those different perspectives, and hopefully at the end of the day, you come up with the best decision for the people in the ward or the riding or the constituency, because that at the end of the day is why we are there as politicians. And so those healthy discussions are extremely important. We need to build links between young women from different walks of life to understand that politics affects our lives and well-being, and that each individual has a role to play. So, you know, we need to have women of color. I mean, we need to have women from all different communities and teach them and grow and have them grow in the political field so that they can have the confidence to run, and convince them, if you will, that we do need them at the political table, that their views and their role is very, very important in the healthy moving forward of our cities, provinces, and the country. Women should have confidence, power, and as I've mentioned before, guts. We need to have guts to do this and to have a voice out in this political arena. We also need to mentor women on how to mount and run a campaign, which I didn't allude to earlier, because as I said, there are no rule books, and that scares a lot of folks, young and old, but I've mentored a lot of young people, and that scares them, because you know they can't find a textbook that says, how can I run? I want to run for politics, but I don't know how to. And so that's so important that we as politicians can mentor them and allow them to run and a campaign and to have a good campaign. So really, just to end, it is about working hard for the young women. It's about building those relationships. And you hear that through and through to today. I've talked about it and others have as well. You've got to build those relationships. You've got to have the best friends, as Sherry said, and those are so important. You've got to work very hard. You've got to be committed. You know, all of us here at this table, we don't work 9 to 5. We work long hours. We work 7 days a week. And when I am mentoring folks, anybody running for politics, I'm honest with them. If they think they're going to have a 9 to 5 job and they're just going to be going to banquets, well, when there were banquets, that is not what the game's all about at all. And if that's what your thought is about it, and I say, you know, I don't think you're ready to run, or I don't think this is for you. You've got to, you know, you've got to get your goals straight. And of course, I say to those young women, you've got to have that good volunteer base, and that goes on to the BFF and your base. You got to hold your ground. You've got to be confident in your decision, and you've just got to forge forward. There will be bumps along the way, but you know what? There's bumps in life in everything we do. So I'll leave it at that. I'll just say I am proud to have mentored many folks, male and female, along the way, and some that have moved on to wonderful roles in the community. So it does work. It can work. Reach out to all of us. That's our job here too. Thank you, Leisha.
Thank you, Councillor Dubois. You've almost convinced me to get into politics. But the point about mentorship is really important, and that leads nicely into our next question for Sherry Benson. So Sherry, the question is, can you talk about the importance of having a mentor or mentors as a politician? And I'm curious too, if you've had a mentor yourself or if you've mentored anyone.
Sure. Well, yes, you need one. And I think I sort of alluded to, you know, sort of the queen of your mentors is your BFF, because they're really the person that really cares about you. They're a friend and a mentor too. They're sort of taking care of the whole of you. But political life, you know, I found is super, it's multifaceted. So I think you kind of need a roster of go-to people, depending on what kind of support you need. And, you know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, Lillian was really helpful for me just to kind of understand the Senate and figure that out. It was someone who I could talk to. Because there's just a bazillion different stages and systems that you do your job on, especially when you're an MP. There's the political party you belong to. There's the electoral district you represent, and you're representing people who voted for you, and you're representing people who didn't vote for you. You're representing all those citizens. So that's another stage. There's the whole bureaucracy of Parliament and governance and how that sort of system works. And then there is the parliamentary system, and that's how you make bills and motions. That's how the Senate works. And so I think you can see that not just one person probably could fill all those sort of roles or sort of be your coach or mentor. And, you know, sometimes you just kind of literally need to know sort of what's happening. So I had someone I sat close to in the House of Commons who I tapped on their shoulder and said more than once, what is going on? You know, like, what is going on here? What is this process? That kind of thing. Sometimes you need someone who's going to navigate the politics, or to sort of answer the question, what is really going on here? Politics is about power. It's about power. It's about personalities. It's about strategy. It's about sort of game plans. It's about and those kinds of things. So you need somebody that you can talk to about that kind of stuff. So I think you need to have this small but mighty list of people you trust who have your best interest at heart, and they have the knowledge and experience to share with you. And for me personally, that was a lifeline in political life, just to have this small group of people that I could turn to. There's no shortage of people that want to give you advice when you become a politician, especially about political party politics. That's where I found a lot of people wanting to give me advice. Some of them have had an experience of being in politics or being in my shoes, wanted to give me advice from that perspective. And some had never been in politics and still wanted to give me their advice on that perspective. I always listen to everyone's advice, you know, most times, you know, except the sort of far out there advice. And then if I thought perhaps it was interesting or brought a different perspective, something I'd never thought of, I'd always kind of vet that with people I know. Like, am I hearing this right? Is this something you've considered? Because I think lots of people like to be kind of armchair quarterbacks when it comes to politics. You know, in my day, this is how it happened. You should do this, that kind of thing, or that kind of. I think that there's two kind of ultimate mentors. There is you. I think people need an ultimate mentor, and this is someone, because it is a hard job. Did I say it was a hard job? Okay, it's a hard job. And you need someone in your life who really deeply cares about you, who loves you. And it can be a partner, it can be a friend, but someone who really knows who you are, knows your blind spots, like is really going to tell you the truth, and you're really going to listen to them because you know they care about you. And I think it can be a partner, it can be a friend. For me, it was my mom. She just had a way of, you know, kind of saying things that really made sense to me. But I think somebody mentioned it here, your ultimate mentor is your gut. That's your gut feeling. I think more often than not, women are really told not to judge that, or not to use that gut feeling, and not to trust it. That's what I mean, not to trust your gut feeling. But I think to be a really good MLA, a really good MP, a really good city councillor, a really good mayor, you need to have a level of self-awareness. You need to kind of know who you are in all of this. I think it makes you great in all those roles. It may not get you elected, but I think if you get elected, it makes you a great elected official. I learned that when I started to feel confused, to me, that was a signal that something was wrong. I either was about to do something I didn't totally agree with, but I didn't know why, or I was about to be a part of some kind of group action that I didn't know. So my gut instinct, when I start to get confused, is when I need to step back and think, okay, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And that is a time to reach out to a mentor. And sometimes that's sort of reaching out to someone you love who really cares about you, because you're trying to sort of figure it out. So mentors are important. I think you need more than one in political life, because political life is very, very complicated, and always trust your gut.
Thank you very much, Sherry. We'll go now to Mayor Sandra Masters. Sandra, could you speak to the money, energy, and commitment it takes to mount a campaign? And we're particularly interested in how to seek financing.
I certainly can speak to this. I believe Sherry Benson just said it's a hard job, and then I think campaigning is a little bit of that on some sort of exponential narrow window time frame sort of scale. It takes everything you got. It takes complete attention, complete dedication, and honestly, the best advice I got from somebody was read the room and stay on message. And so why that's important is because, frankly, at the end of the day, if you're going to run for politics, you're selling yourself. And sometimes if you're party affiliated, so I have the beauty of civic politics is that you're not affiliated with a party in Saskatchewan anyways. And so there's a bit of freedom in terms of your nimbleness and ability to adapt and actually be open-minded to other ideas. That's not the same party politics, and people should be aware of that. In party politics, you're given the party message, but running for politics is, the challenges are name recognition, media attention, something called experience, although I think it's a code word for credibility. And I'm just here to tell you that leadership skills are completely transferable. So don't let anybody tell you that you have to be experienced to be run for politics. It's nonsense. You do have to be informed. You have to educate yourself. And you got to build the team. And I think I love that everybody talks about that in terms of putting people around yourself. Preferably some who even maybe disagree with you on things, because, you know, I hear words from Sherry like self-awareness and vetting ideas. So if I get this idea from this particular person, If I test it against someone who I know may have a different viewpoint, how does it come out? And it's because your job as a politician or a candidate is to bring people together. And that requires a certain skill sets. So as much as we want to promote running for politics, it isn't for everybody, because there has to be parts of yourself which you end up being comfortable enough knowing that you're selling yourself, you're selling your commitment to the job, your ability to persevere and be hardworking, to be open-minded. And going back to the beginning, you have to show up. And so to get financing, you have to convince people to back you, that your ideas are worthwhile, that you can adapt, that you do have that skill set, and that you can bring people together, and sometimes bring people together again with opposing views. I think someone said it, we self-select ourselves out, so don't do that. But if you can start within a core group of your close friends and say, I'm thinking of doing this, if you're going to plan for it, you should start planning. You need to show up, you need to get involved, whether that's with political organizations, with community organizations, with other political entities, maybe support a counselor running, work on someone else's team. There's experience you can garner that you don't have to put yourself out there right away. You can actually build a skill set, which then allow you to kind of open yourself up about it. Your personality traits are going to come into it. And so I'm going to build on Sherry's point again, which is you have to be self-aware. You have to know your own blind spots, because your blind spots are where you're going to end up either feeling attacked or weak, and you're not, because nobody is everything. Again, and so it's just about putting people around yourself that you can call, going, okay, I'm not strong in this, or I feel insecure or uninformed about this. I need to build that part up. It doesn't have to be you. You just need to put those people around yourself. And I was incredibly fortunate that when I started building the team, they would tell their friends, and then they started to gather. And that's really how you get financing, because that builds upon people buying into your story, buying into your viability as a candidate, that they want to contribute. And so you have to put yourself out there in terms of letting people, signaling to people that you may be interested in running. And then there's 100 different ways you can get yourself experience. Doesn't have to be running as a candidate and losing. It could be, again, serving community organization boards, PTAs. It's everything. It's the gamut for how you can get involved. And I will tell you something that I find personally very valuable is distinguishing being likable to tying your value to being liked. I don't. I fully understand as a politician, in order to bring people together, I need to be likable. People need to feel, and I need to listen. I need to be able to connect with them. But if someone dislikes me or disagrees with me, I don't go home and feel bad about myself, because I don't tie my value to other people. My value is contained within myself and those really close relationships I've built, whether with my children or my close friends. So I have value whether I'm the mayor or not. I have value with the people that love and truly know me. And so to put yourself out there and think that everybody is going to like you, it's not going to happen. And so just don't tie your value to the dislikes. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. That resonates with me. Diane Boyko, you'll be next. And so our question is this. Unfortunately, sexism still exists in politics. It exists everywhere, but in politics, as what we're talking about today. What can you do when you witness or experience it? And really to think about, how can someone call it out without the usual retort of, quit being so sensitive?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Leisha. Yes, unfortunately, sexism still does exist. And we as women, I believe, that have all found ourselves in those circumstances where sexism is exhibited in one way or another, in one degree or another, and during different times in our lives. So when comments are directed at us personally, or we are witness to them, whether it's a lighthearted joke in the company of our family, or it's a condescending put down at work, in that work environment where we should feel safe, I'd venture to say that all of us here on the panel have been there, and most of the women who are joining us today have also been there too. And I would venture to say that, you know, the men in our lives, whether it's personal or at work, have also experienced our experience, if I can say it that way. And they've seen it too. And whether they have been advocates for us or whether they've silently stood by, that's also says something about the work that needs to be done, I guess. And so, you know, how do you overcome that uncomfortable moment that we're experiencing over sexism when our ability to handle the job at hand is questioned because we're too emotional, or we're wearing 3-inch heels, or we're hitting like a girl? And we all know that at times like this, the most difficult thing to do is to stand up for ourselves. And so how do we, the question asks is what can we do to when we're experiencing it as individuals, what can we do to stand up for ourselves? And so I thought about that, and I thought about what's the best way to respond to an offensive remark. Is it that pregnant silence that sometimes happens, however slight, where you don't react and everyone feels the uncomfortable silence? And for me, I'm really bad with that 30-second rule about being silent, letting other people engage. So do you do that? Is there that lighthearted approach where you ask, you really don't want me to answer that in front of your boss, do you? Is it the direct challenge where you say, sorry, I don't understand your point, or if that's a joke, did you want to explain it to me? And my favorite, and I've used this on numerous times, if that was your mother or your sister or your daughter, would you say those things and think it was okay? And from experience, sometimes those strategies work and sometimes they don't. And then we all know that at times, the second most difficult thing to do is to stand up for the other person in a crowd. What does it mean to be the active bystander when we witness that inappropriate behavior? And we know that we're speaking up for each other at the right moment. And are we letting that bully know that mark isn't appreciated? We know it's about offering that emotional support, that right at that moment to soften the blow, we show we expect better of other people. And we know it's about taking that situation, sometimes with humor, sometimes with challenge, and sometimes with silence. I read a statistic the other day that spoke to the fact that there's 76% of us say that we would call out sexist behavior in support of the victim, but actually only 46% do. I don't know if I was surprised it was so low or if I should be surprised that it's so high. I just know that we need to do better and that we can, and we need to model that. And it's about those teaching and learning moments that we have in our everyday lives that allows us to make those changes. I think it's about all of us as a collective, that being strong enough to change the narrative. It's not accepting the status quo that's out there in our spheres of influence. And it's about being the strong women that we are, that we, you know, maybe cut that conversation off right at the bud before it even happens. And that is about taking our experience within our different avenues and being the strong women that we are. You know, it's about that recognition of what it means about the solidarity of like-minded people. And we all know if we were in a crowd, all of us 7 women that are on this panel, we know if we were in a crowd that no one would get away with treating us in that manner. And it's about sharing that success also with women and girls in all kinds of disciplines and lifting them up as role models for all of our children. And that is exactly what all of us are doing, is we are the role models of our children, boy or girl. And it's about, in my case, it's about the school settings where that modeling for those boys and girls teaches about what it means to respect each other, to stand by each other, to recognize and to celebrate the gifts of each other. You know, there's that saying, and I'll probably paraphrase it in a bad way, but that changes in the world is in the hand that rocks the cradle. And we all know that. And I would say from the educational perspective, it's in the hand that teaches in the classroom. And that's where all of that change will come from. And so for all of us, it's our responsibility to step up there for the woman who stands right beside you. And the most beautiful thing would be for us to know that they will stand up for us. And I think it's that not being afraid to be the voice for each other.
Thank you very much for that, Diane. Aaron, one last question from this round. We'll go to you next. Research has shown that on average, a woman needs to be asked to run for office 7 times before she will say yes. And men only need to be asked once. Given that it takes so many times to get a yes, what do you see as the solution to getting gender parity in representative politics?
So this is an example of what would be called a psychological barrier to women going into politics versus a structural barrier. So I think this is a product of common knowledge understandings of politics being internalized by women. They don't see themselves belonging in politics or qualified for politics, or there also might be some aspects of politics or government that don't seem appealing to them. Because of the society we live in, the strategies discussed as solutions to gender equity issues are often individualistic in nature, basically some form of women's self-empowerment. And not that these are not important. I think these types of strategies are definitely a part of the solution, as well as more societal changes, such as what I talked about during my last question of the media challenging the status quo. But the problem with these sorts of solutions is they take a really long time to actually cause change. And there's really no evidence that these types of approaches will actually bring equity to governments. But even if they can, it's going to be very slow. I believe one study estimated that it will take a minimum of another 100 years for women to gain equity in Canadian governments if we continue to focus on individual or grassroots strategies. So the other category of solutions is affirmative action, of which there are many different kinds. Trudeau's gender balanced cabinet is an example of affirmative action, which I would love to see more actions taken like that in Canadian politics. But I think there are also smaller actions that can be taken that have a large impact. One action for this particular problem is for leaders of parties to put in the time to ask women 7 times, if that's what it takes. I was in a student organization called Women in the Legislature, and we would take a group of female undergraduate students to the legislature every year and hold panels with various politicians and civil servants. And in my last year, we learned about this strategy being implemented by Cam Broughton, who was the leader of the NDP at the time. He obviously knew about this stat, or someone did, and because of this, his team put in the time and effort to ask women to run multiple times. And I don't remember the full details, so I might have some of the details wrong, but by doing this, he was able to get, I believe, close to, if not 50% women running for the NDP that year, which is obviously less effective as a minority party, but I cannot tell you how encouraged the women we brought there were by this. I think it was one of the first times they felt wanted in politics. And I think that's one of the reasons why affirmative action works so well. Women have been told for literally centuries that leadership and government is not for them, and affirmative action changes that. So this strategy is quite simple. It's just a matter of putting in the time, but can you imagine how effective it could be if every political party did that?
Thank you very much, Erin. We'll go to round 3 now. And again, we're keeping the answers shorter for this round. We'll give everyone about 3 minutes for these questions. So Lillian Dick, I'll start with you. As a female politician, what has been the biggest barrier you have faced in your career?
Harassment. And harassment actually has been a key feature when I was an undergraduate student, a graduate student, a professor, a senator, and in my occupation, I was a woman in science. And as you know, there are not that many women in science. So I've had to deal with it pretty much my whole life. So I guess I would say, I think most women, especially young women, be prepared for harassment. I didn't really expect to face it in the Senate because the Senate is thought to be a chamber of sober second thought, filled with thoughtful and respectful persons. But there were a few toxic senators. And harassment is a partisan tool. It's used as a partisan tool to try to derail things that are going on politically. And in my case, in the one instance, it was used as a way to intimidate me, to diminish my authority. I was the chair of the Aboriginal Peoples Committee, and it was used as a technique to kind of, derail what was going on at that committee. I've probably had about 5 or 6 senators in 15 and a half years. In most cases, it was male and female. It was Indigenous and non-Indigenous. In most cases, it was easy to deal with. It was, I would stand up at the first situation and say, look, what you're doing is not right. Don't do this to me again. If you do that, I will submit a letter of complaint. And then with the most severe harassment, I found out that in the Senate, and maybe so in the House of Commons too, that question of the parliamentary privilege protects the senator who's doing the harassment. And so then when I tried to lay a complaint, I found out that I couldn't, that his question of his parliamentary privilege was such that I couldn't do it. But yet then I said on the chamber floor and in public, well, what about my privilege to be free from harassment? Why is it? It's an unequal application of privilege. And so that question is still an open question, which I think really needs to continue to be brought forward. The Senate certainly is a body with a lot of privilege, and a senator should not be allowed to use their privilege as a way to intimidate, harass, or demean another senator. So that's an outstanding question. And certainly I'm happy that it didn't happen often, and I certainly don't think it should happen in the future. And so I will continue to write and to bring that issue forward. Women in politics can face harassment, and the reality is that it is more vicious for women than it is for men, sometimes with vile and degrading comments. Some of the email messages that I got were just unbelievable. There were several that my staff wouldn't even let me look at because they said it's just too vicious. And remember, what happened to Catherine McKenna when she was Minister of Environment. She had just a vile message painted on her constituency office. And other women MPs got death threats. That's how bad it can be. So we have to be aware of that and be prepared and have a support system. Your staff, your colleagues, your best friends, your family, your spouse, your daughter, your son, whoever. I think we need to have more awareness that partisan politics can be really dirty. And sometimes women and minorities are the victim to that. But the reason for that is because they're trying to silence us, and we know that. And so we have to continue to speak out against it ourselves and encourage our colleagues also to stand with us and put an end to it. And I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you, Lillian. That leads well into our next question for Councillor Bev Dubois. As Lillian mentioned, women in politics are often subjected to negative and vitriolic public discourse and comments, whether that be online, phone calls, or elsewhere. How do you, Bev, navigate and handle this?
Well, thank you, Leisha. And yes, Senator Dick's last comments is a good segue into this question. My first comments are, don't take it personally. You need to have thick skin. When you're a politician, you need to have thick skin and be honest in your convictions and your decisions. Stand by what you believe. And this topic that you brought forward it's very true, and there's many different facets to this topic actually. And I've had in my 14 years on council so far, I've had many different experiences. Again, I could write a little pocket novel, but everything from being in national meetings in Ottawa when I was on the FCM board to someone saying, you don't look like you're from Saskatoon. you know, where I looked at them and said, you know, and I went right back, because of course I'm not going to be silenced. I said, really? What do we look like in Saskatoon? You know, do you think I should have a wheat thing sticking out of my mouth and, you know, dressed in, like, it's disgusting, quite frankly. Or there was a time I was flying back home. I was in the Toronto airport and I had my carry-on and my business card was, you know, in my identification sticker. And I guess a guy must have seen it when I was standing in line. It must have been turned that way. Oh, and he comes running after me and he says, "You don't look like a politician." And I, you know, and so my question is, what do politicians look like? You know, they're male, they're female, they're black, they're white, they're young, they're old, you know, and these conversations and these, you know, quite frankly, hideous remarks, you know, provided to those of us are disgusting. I have to say, I haven't had any harassment issues in my from my councils over the years. You know, we've gotten along really well. I have had things from male members of council over the years, more so in the beginning of my terms, saying, why don't you just pull that motion you put forward? You know, it's too contentious, and you know, maybe we can talk about it, you know, a different time, or can you just can you not keep discussing that issue? And I said, no, I mean, this is an issue near and dear to the community, and we have to discuss it. We have to, it doesn't matter how long it takes. And I pushed forward with those issues because that's my job. And that's what we need to do. It's the hard questions, it's the hard issues that we need to carry on with. I've had death threats too, believe it or not, in municipal politics. I have had death threats, and I've just dealt with them. Of course, as a city councillor, whenever we have any kind of threats, we are to let the police chief know right away. So of course I did that, and you know, the police did what they needed to do. When I was first elected in 2003, I had a man constantly phoning my cell phone in the evening saying, "What are you doing? Where are you?" And it got so that I was scared, and I contacted the police chief as well. And thankfully nothing happened. But those things do happen to politicians, and I think that they happen more so to women. And so again, there's that thick skin. You know, you've got to know that happens. And another quick situation here as I end, when I was in 2003, when I first ran, and there was me and the three other men, and our very first forum, someone in the audience said to one of the fellows who didn't live in the area, and as we know in municipal politics, you don't have to live in the area that you're running. He lived across town. And someone said to him, "Why are you running here? You know, you live over across the river." And he said, "I just want to beat Bev Dubois." And I wasn't even on council yet. And that kind of, I'm not going to lie, it did kind of shake me, you know, but I thought that even gave me more strength and more gumption to say, you know, the heck with you. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to work, and I'm going to do this because I need to be there. We women need to be there. But, you know, there are situations that happen to all of us that are uncomfortable and negative. And I will say social media has added another facet to that, because people can make comments and they're not saying it to your face, you know, and they're behind a curtain, so to speak. And there are a lot of negative comments on social media in regards to issues that we deal with at City Council, and you know, issues as to how I vote as well sometimes. And you know, I have to say, most of the time when these are on social media, they actually are not even, they don't know the whole story, and they don't know all of the information. And you read it and you say, really? You know, they're saying that, and that's not even what we talked about. That's not even what I said. But that's the problem with social media, right, as well, is that, you know, it's kind of like a rumor. You know, one person puts a comment, and then others do, and before you know it, it's not even related back to the very first comment. And so you know, that's why communication is so extremely important in all of our role, but in my role. And I do my best to communicate to my ward, to my residents. I've got many different ways to do that, to set the record straight, and so that they know that, you know, really what's going on. You also have to decide what is worth to engage. Is this a hill to die on? Do you need to get involved in these conversations that, you know, most of the time will never have an end, because people, there are trolls out there on social media as well. And there are people that have a lot of time, and they're just on there all the time. So you have to decide, am I going to keep engaging? And so that is a decision that you have to go by. You have to stand up to yourself for what you're voting on, what you're talking about. Last thing, when folks call, and sometimes people can be very upset, and they can be very angry towards me. And you know, a lot of times it's just having that conversation. And at the end of the call, you know what, they're absolutely fine. You might not agree, because I'm a politician that will not, I stand by what I do. I do my homework, I do my voting, I stand by what I do, and I can support it. And we may not agree, and that's okay, but I will never give in, if you will, to a constituent just to get a vote, or just to get, you know, a happy comment. What I stand for is what I stand for. We'll have to agree to disagree. But I find most folks just need to talk it out, and know that you're there to take their call, and know that they're there, that you are there to listen to them. So the main thing is telling the truth. They might not like it, but you have to tell the truth. Be transparent, be kind, and know that in most cases, the negative comments are not directly against you, but those people in most cases are passionate about the issue or discussion that they are having. So you need thick skin, don't take it personally, and through all of this discussion today, you need a good support system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will go to Sherry Benson next. Sherry, what advice would you like to give the next generation of female leaders?
It's quite that's a tall order, but so when I arrived in Ottawa to take my seat, I was really shocked to find that there were members of Parliament. I'm going to try to say this in the most respectful way, that had gone to university, got a degree, worked in a constituency office, and then became an MP. So their whole experience was political. And, you know, obviously most of them were excellent MPs because they got elected. So what they're doing on that level is successful. But I guess it's my opinion that sort of limited life experience, like not much outside of politics, I don't know if that makes them the best member of Parliament. I think, I guess I have to add is being a great member of Parliament doesn't get you elected either. There are a lot of things at play when it comes to being, you know, and that's a whole other conversation, a whole other meeting. But I think my advice would be is to kind of know what you want to accomplish in life, and sort of what is the change you want to see, and go out and explore how to make that change. And if it ends up being politics, being elected sort of sounds like the way or the place you have the most leverage, or the place where you think the skills you have to make the change you want to see make sense, then go for it. I think there's lots of ways you can get experience in life. This isn't an ageist thing. I'm not saying you have to do 20 years, you know, in the nonprofit sector like I did, and then somehow you're magically ready to be a politician. It's not that at all. It's just that sort of trying to figure out who you are, and then you find out if politics is the place for you. About 1 million years ago, someone asked me if I wanted to run to be the president of my union. And I said no, I didn't run. And I'm glad I said no at the time. It didn't make sense to me at the moment, but that person did for me, what that person did for me by asking me was allowed me to start to think about myself in that role. I'd never thought of myself that way. So you start to think, I wonder why that person asked me. So whenever I see someone in the community who I think will be a great leader, who I think will be a great MP, I try to have the habit of telling them, have you ever thought of running for elected office? Because I want to plant that seed in someone else, because someone did that for me. And then I ended up being a member of parliament. And, you know, I think those things are connected. You can think what you want. And whether I have that impact on someone else or not doesn't matter to me. I just want to sort of pay it forward, put that seed in someone, like someone did for me. And I think what makes me so hopeful is that I could say that a bazillion times a day almost. There is such a wonderful group of young, tenacious, smart, young women leaders that I'm very hopeful. That I think our future is in very good hands. So I try to be as generous as I can with my time, trying to get people to think of themselves as leaders, even though they may not think of themselves as leaders yet. What I usually say is, like I said to that 8th grade class, ask me anything. If you want to know what it's like to be an MP, if you really want to know and you want to have that conversation, I'm more than happy to do that. And it doesn't matter, you can ask me, you know, from what's the pay to be an MP to, you know, what happens if I don't agree with all the positions my party takes. Like, what if I'm not on side? What does that mean? And I think those were all great questions that I would like to have had a conversation with someone before I ran. So I'll end with just kind of sending that out there to the universe. If anyone is interested in that conversation. I was going to say I live at the United Way, but currently the headquarters for United Way is in my bedroom. So, but please reach out to me, and if you're interested in having that conversation. That's my advice. And take it if you want. Leave it if you don't.
Thanks so much for that. We'll go back to Mayor Sandra Masters. The former Prime Minister Kim Campbell once suggested that to encourage more women to enter politics, riding should be split into 2 seats. So with half of those seats reserved for women. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. From a practical perspective, that sounds expensive and unwieldy. From that perspective, and it seems to me to be driving to an outcome trying to circumvent the core issue, which is women need to want to be there, women need to believe they belong there, and women need to run. And opinion that, and it's just an opinion, bordering on belief that if women run, they're going to win. And not every time, but we need them to put their name forward to be in the hunt. And it comes down to some of those things called statistics. But if you look at all the men that have ever run and how many win, we just need to match the number of women running. So how do they need to want to be there? And I think that's for some of the panel and myself, which is, it's an incredible privilege to serve. It's I've only been at it for a little while, and it's the most fantastic experience outside of my kids to date. And what it opens up for you in terms of your ability to connect with people from you get opportunities to be in rooms you would never have the opportunity otherwise, simply just by virtue of being elected. Believing they belong there, I'm of the firm opinion as well that the young women leaders that are out in our community and our universities, they know there, and that's a huge shift in the last 25 years probably, but I would think that people blazing that trail and putting their name forward and putting up with some of the negative aspects of being in politics that have been spoken about is that they belong there, but we need them to put their names forward. And you need to be prepared to lose maybe once, maybe twice, and just keep at it. And if there's something I know about how women advance, whether in politics or the workplace, is you just keep going. You persevere and you're persistent, and that's how success comes about. There's always doors that are going to open if you actually put yourself out there. So that's what I think.
Thank you very much for that. Diane Boyko, question for you. How important is consensus building in politics? How can you bridge divides in gender, ideologies, et cetera, to build consensus?
Well, we all know that that's probably the truest form of democracy, is when consensus is built around the table. I remember many years ago, probably about 10, my oldest daughter was part of a parliamentary internship scholarship that our good friend Joe Garcia really encouraged her to go and participate in Ottawa. And what they did is they were part of an MP's life. So they got to choose for 5 months with a sitting MP and 5 months with a government MP. And then they also studied different forms of government throughout the world. And so they went to Brussels to be part of the European Union. They went to New York to the UN. They went to Washington, D.C. To meet with Mr. Kennedy and Senator McCain. And the most important thing that she said that they did is they went to Nunavut and they studied what collaborative government is all about. And that those people sit around the table and build consensus. And in a perfect world, wouldn't that be a perfect way to deal with almost all of our issues? That we would all come together to understand people's perspectives, different perspectives, but come there with the respect and the trust that we are that we want for ourselves, that we offer to everyone else. I come from our board, which is very much a consensus building board. We are elected at large, so we have no specific territory within the city of Saskatoon, and we bring 3 other trustees that come from specific areas. So in this case, it would be Humboldt and Biggar, and then the rural east of Saskatoon with Martensville and Warman. And we come together to make decisions based on the best decisions that we can make with the best information that we have for all of the students and all of the schools and all of the staff within our division. So that means building consensus for the school in Biggar that will have 160 students, to Holy Cross here in Saskatoon that has 1,300, to the new schools that are opening up in the cities of Martensville and Warman within the last, I guess it's 4 years now. And so that consensus building has just been part of, I would believe, that many school boards live within those kind of parameters. They're the ones that are needing to do that. I think, from our provincial perspective, there was the amalgamation that occurred, that at one point there were 72 school boards before they went down to what we have now is 27. That's an amazing amount of consensus that needed to be built around the table. And I think that all the trustees that are part of all of those conversations are honing those skills to be able to make, again, those best decisions. And in tough circumstances sometimes, because you have such a variety of ideas, but they were called to do that and they did. And I think that kind of consensus building is what gets us the good governance that does happen within school boards. It's imperative that whole piece about trust and respect and just that listening effectively is such an important point. But I think what we also have to remember that when you're building that consensus, it's about debating the differences, and that's a healthy thing. And that we need to recognize that those differences, the opinions, they come sometimes to a give or take scenario where a decision needs the decision that needs to be made is going to be something in the middle. And how does that good faith that we are exhibiting, how does it meet all the interests and maximize all the outcomes? Is that an easy thing in some cases? No, it's not. I think of, the work that we're doing with the Saskatchewan School Boards Association and our mandate for our collective action. So we speak for 27 boards who represent their local voices at the table, and we're advocating for 180,000 students across the province. So we're bridging different ideologies in some circumstances. And sometimes those challenges, they can be resolved easily, and sometimes they take a little more effort. But the characteristics I mentioned earlier about that trust and coming to the table and always being present and never giving up, and along with the belief that we have much more in common than we do the differences. That is what I think we need to remember when we are speaking to what consensus actually means, and just advocating for this province that we're trying to do the best that we can do in whatever political sphere, whether it is school boards, whether it is municipal or federal or the Senate, that we're all there as a collective, bringing our own experiences, bringing our own conversations, and recognizing that we have the obligation to sit at that table and come to a consensus. So I just think it's the cornerstone of what we do as political beings.
Thanks very much, Diane. Aaron, we'll go to you next. Women are more likely than men to find themselves running in hard-to-win ridings instead of in party strongholds. So also, women tend to receive less money from their party and riding associations to fund their campaign. As a result, they get elected less often than men. So what can be done to level the playing field so that more women have a better chance of being elected?
So for this, I think the solution lies in a radical change to our electoral system. A prominent reason that scholars often point to as a barrier for women in politics in Canada is our electoral system, which is a single-member plurality system. Other countries that have the same electoral system, such as the UK and the US, have similarly low numbers of women in their governments. Conversely, countries that have alternative electoral systems, in particular proportional representation systems, generally have higher rates of women and other minoritized groups in their legislatures. So there are multiple structural features of these systems that are thought to be the cause of this. I won't go through them all because of time, and it's probably fairly boring to most people. But just as an example, one of the structural features speaks directly to this question, which is how candidates are nominated. Proportional representation systems have a centralized nomination process. In one of the more popular versions of proportional representation called party list systems, the party leaders create the list of candidates, meaning they can influence the proportion of women nominated in response to public pressure. In contrast to this centralized process, in Canada, the nomination process is very decentralized, where candidates are selected through parties' ridings associations. Research has found that women are less likely than men to be selected for candidacy through the riding associations. One reason being they tend to skew more conservative than their corresponding party leaders. So I think the best way to change this is to change the system entirely. Obviously, more easily said than done. It is not a quick or easy change by any means, but I still think it's important to continue to advocate for it because understanding these structural barriers to women entering politics brings awareness to them. And in the meantime, for riding associations to change, I think all of society would need to change. So focusing on challenging the political status quo, like I've previously discussed, is something that we can start with.
Thank you very much, Erin, and thank you to all of our panelists this morning. This has been absolutely wonderful. I've learned so much actually, and so much of it is applicable beyond political life. So I thank all of you for being so open and for sharing with us. I'll now turn it over to Chief Commissioner Arnott, who is joining us again to share some closing remarks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you very much, panelists. That was so strong. You know, we all heard, I say, wise counsel. We were given some wise advice. Very interesting and dynamic, and very intelligent and articulate comments. I feel that when I said we had a stellar Saskatchewan panel, boy, this panel really proved it. Look at the shared attributes of all the panelists and our MC as well. You know, great confidence, great listeners, courage, great mentors, great mentees, and self-awareness and great work ethic. It was really compelling. And I feel I learned a lot as well. And it tells me I need to learn a lot more. I thought I understood some of these issues, but just to hear the way it's been presented, very strong. And I feel that we need to build on what we've heard on this panel. And I hope we come back to this issue or issues similar to this on gender discrimination in further courageous conversations. But I really want to thank the panelists. I want to thank our MC, Alicia Grabinski. That was very seamless. You made that discussion go very seamless, Alicia. And to the panelists, Dr. Lillian Dick, of course, a former senator, Bev Dubois, Saskatoon City Councillor, Sherry Benson, the former MP for Saskatoon West, Sandra Masters, the Mayor of Regina, Diane Boyko, the chair of the Greater Saskatoon Catholic School Division, and Aaron Philippou, a researcher in political science and a very articulate one at that. So thank you very much to all our panelists, to Lisa. Thanks for all the participants, really strong participation. I have for every one of the panelists and for Alicia, the highest honor we can give to the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission, from the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission, which is the leather-bound copy of the hate speech case that the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission took to the Supreme Court of Canada. It's the most significant contribution Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission has ever made to Canadian jurisprudence. It's so important, especially attached to some of the things raised here today, because words have the power to maim, shame, and blame. So this is a compilation of the judgment, which was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, very rare, and our factum, which, if you compare the two, the factum and the judgment are aligned, which means we had a great lawyer, Grant Sharfstein, who argued this case for us at the Supreme Court. So with that, I want to thank everybody, thank all the participants that came on board. I think we were up to just over 100 at one point. And thank you to the panelists for your good comments. And thank you for providing another stellar, courageous conversation through the auspices of the Human Rights Commission here in Saskatchewan. Thanks to all. I will personalize these books, and each one of you will get one of these books in the very near future. Thanks for all your help today. Best wishes, and hopefully we'll continue some of these discussions in the future.